To everybody out there, I know that it has been a very, very, very rough few months for you as we've been on hiatus, but don't worry, we are back. I am none other than Rabbi Pinchas Landis, and I am here with the one, the only, the OC, original cohort, Rabbi Gamliel Nassan Halevi Spero. Rabbi Spero, how are you doing today?
Great. Baruch Hashem. Rabbi Landis, enthusiastic as always. It's been a while, but we've undergone a lot. Corona, heavy snow, hailstones, all sorts of things were happening here.
You know, it's been a while, but I've been practicing that introduction every day since our last episode because it's like, you know, it's very important to me to get the introduction right. It's a very important thing in my life. But, you know, we do want to apologize to all you out there who've been sending us, you know, the emails, the text messages. Yeah, facsimiles, carrier pigeons, everything, trying to wonder where the Rabbis podcast has been. All 3.5 of you, we thank you for your support and for asking for us. And we are back now after, you know, Baruch Hashem, recovering from the coronavirus. And it's been a busy time for the Landises with everything we're busy with, a busy time for the Speros, a lot of snow, a lot of stuff. But here we are back in the saddle, ready to give you more of the Rabbis podcast. So, you know, like Rabbi Spero, what are we talking about today? We're holding here at such an auspicious time. We're in the Parshios of the Binyan Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan. We're right before Purim. We're just a few days.
I think we should go back from our last podcast and try to cover a pasuk breakdown.
Yeah, I think we had to cover everything since our last podcast, which our last podcast, I believe, was like beginning of December. So, yeah, we have a lot to cover. We got Hanukkah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but what have you been up to, Rabbi Spero? What's been happening in the yeshiva? The yeshiva is moving along. Give me a good update on what's been happening.
The yeshiva's great. Baruch Hashem. We're learning, doing our best, getting ready for Purim. I sound like I'm not. She was great as always. Baruch Hashem, really doing good.
Rabbi Spero got very boring over the past few months. There's nothing.
What if I have nothing left to say? What if it's just the end? What if I have? I always wondered that about certain singers. At a certain point, what if you have no more songs left in you?
Right.
Like, what would happen if Avram Fried? I love Avram Fried, but let's say after No Jewel Be Left Behind. I don't know if it's his first album or one of his first albums. He just was like, I have nothing else left to say.
Then he becomes what we call a one-hit wonder, and that's it, you know, and he's gone. So, but, you know, this reminded me of my word for the day. I did learn a new word this week, actually yesterday, and I want to teach it to all our listeners here today. Our word for today is amelioration. Okay, does anyone out there know what amelioration means? I didn't, but it's actually an art scroll word because I was learning. My chavrus and I are about to make a siyum on Masechta Brachos. Baruch Hashem, I've been zocheh to learn Brachos a number of times, and I still don't remember any of it. But we're getting up to the end. I think we're on Daf Nun Hey, and over there it talks about what we call in Hebrew hatavas chalaim. That if somebody has a bad dream, there's a certain interaction you can do to make it better. In art scroll language, that is called amelioration.
Really?
Okay. So hatava in English is amelioration, making better. Making something better is to ameliorate it. So
good word.
You know, I think it's whoever came up with that word. It sounds very similar to annihilate, so it can throw you off, but it's total opposite. It's to make better. So Rabbi Spero, you know, at this point, we're going to get back into people's lives to ameliorate their lives and just give them some great things. So. You know, I'll tell you something interesting we've been doing is always trying to expand and do things different. That recently we've gotten onto Clubhouse. Rabbi Spero, are you familiar with Clubhouse?
I'm not.
So Clubhouse is the new social media app out there. Imagine Zoom, but it's number one, it's socially acceptable to keep your camera off because there is no camera. It's just voice. but you have the ability to make your rooms public. So usually you can't really make your Zoom rooms public at all, but in Clubhouse you can choose if you make it public or private. So of course all the classes we give on Clubhouse now are public, and anyone can come in and participate. It's been very interesting. A whole new avenue of Torah teaching is on the horizon. So be sure to follow us on Clubhouse.
I've been doing a great thing recently. Yeah, speaking about that, I look for like Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazi meetings on Clubhouse and Zoom, and I crashed a meeting in my talis and tefillin, and I just start like reading psukim and saying over Gemaras. It's wild. One of my favorite things to do. Yeah, very.
Actually, that's a great idea. We should try that. I'm thinking about that. Maybe whatever. Soon we'll try that. So, anyways, Rabbi Spero, give me we got Purim right here. Give me just a good. I need a good Purim insight. I feel like I haven't spent enough time doing the Purim Hachana. I usually try and pound my way through the Sifsei Chaims because they're beautiful. It's like that. I think 10 essays on Purim, which I try and go through them every year before Purim, and I just haven't done that. Haven't even read them again. I just haven't prepared. So I need you to help me get ready for Purim, Rabbi Spero.
But I don't know if I can help you. But first thing, before we just get into Purim, I want to talk about something about Clubhouse. You said you're from Atlanta. It was a really beautiful. It was one of the best baseball fights in baseball history. Happened between San Diego Padres and the Atlanta Braves in the '80s at some point. Bob Horner. I don't know if you even know these names.
Glenn Hubbard, Dale Murphy.
Kurt Vivacqua of the Padres was a
Phil
beautiful fight. And what was unique about that fight, that fans got involved, and there were players standing on top of the clubhouse. Like a famous baseball fight. So that made you think about Clubhouse. But discuss Purim. There's so much to say about Purim. There's so many important ideas to talk about. I think one idea is the idea, which is always a Jewish topic, is the idea of hope. And Rav Tzaddik HaKohen talks about a lot that one of the midos of Amalek would attack the weaker part, the people of the people walking in behind who were weak. It actually, the Alexander Rebbe told me a fascinating insight. Amalek was known for slave trading. That was what they used to do. So they were nomadic. They didn't have a specific home. They would travel around the Middle East, and they would go to countries and find the weaker element, find people, and kidnap them, and then sell them in other places as slaves. So when people wonder, why do we have to kill Amalek? Amalek was a menace to society, an overall menace to society, that they would kidnap people and steal from them. So in any case, Rav Tzaddik says that one of the things that Amalek caused in the Jewish people when they first attacked us, in Parashas Kiseitze, we read about this past Shabbos, was the lack of hope. Amalek stood for Yish, of giving up hope. And on Purim, one of the primary ideas of Purim is the idea of hope. Right? Even after a decree of genocide was issued against the Jewish people, is the idea of being able to, I feel like the Gemara says in Brachas Daf Yud, right, which you just learned, afilu cherev munach al tzavrav, even a sword is above someone's neck, the person still has to feel that he still feels he has opportunity. That's why it's interesting. The Yerushalmi actually says that the whole Chodesh Adar is kosher l'kriyas Megillah. It's a machlokes or chelva. Is it the whole month or only till the 15th? But certainly we're in that period right now. You can really read Megillah the whole Adar, because the whole Adar is based on hope, because we don't see anything as random. So what the Amalekim, when Haman did his Gairol, did his lottery, and it came out in Adar, and he said it was random, we saw it coming up in Adar, knowing that it was purposeful. And to us, all lotteries, all lots drawn are purposeful. So that's one of the main lessons, is to feel hopeful at this time of year. And the idea also of Jews being able to share with each other and give to each other, right? Mishloach manos, sharing one of the mitzvahs, other mitzvah matanos of Yonim, gives to the poor, having sudas together. And Rabbi Landis, I'm not even going to ask. I know you're being socially responsible and social distancing at your suda. We actually bought for yeshiva like 10-foot poles, and in the Purim spirit, we're going to put food at the end of each one of them. We're all going to feed each other like that by the Purim suda. So we're looking forward to that. We got extra long straws. So
where's the yeshiva going to be for the Purim suda this year?
This year we're doing it at yeshiva, Nada Heights Jewish Center in the basement, where we normally do this year to keep it small. almost all yeshiva had corona, so we're just doing it small together at yeshiva.
Right, beautiful. That's a beautiful idea you said about the idea of hope when it comes to Purim. And I know I've said this last year, and this is already our third Purim now of the Rabbis podcast, but I think it's a very important idea that I've never gotten a good answer to. And that is that why on Purim do we not focus on the fact that Purim was in many ways the prelude to going back to Bayis Sheni? In other words, we had that the Koresh lets Zerubbabel and Ezra go back, right? Then they're thwarted by the not so good Samaritans, aka the Shomronim, the Kusim, whatever you want to call them, and Achashverosh keeps that decree in place. And then the following king, Daryavish, who I used to always teach, was the son of Achashverosh and Esther. I don't teach that anymore. It doesn't seem to add up, according to my good friend Rabbi Yossi Quadrat.
Really, I should tell you. I interrupt you 1 second. Yerushalmi brings it as the machlokes. Right.
So Yishar brings it as machlokes. So Rabbi Yossi Quadrat from Kan has a number of kashas on the shita that says it was the son of Esther. He says it doesn't add up. I forget all his proofs. But
it brings the drush Vatizachal Esther means she miscarried.
Right.
And then they never had children. So
and then there's a couple both as he usually does Kedarka Kodesh, both from within Chazal and from the history in general, and as be it as it may, we know that there was a Daryavish. I mean, the bigger issue, I think I shared with you his article about trying to make sense of all the names, about who was Koresh, who was Daryavish, who was Arpachshastad, however you pronounce it. And it seems like there's a lot of overlapping of names, the different names used. What's that?
What's the name? Xerxes?
No, I'm talking about just names in Tanakh. You're talking about the Persian names, right? Xerxes.
One of my kids is named Xerxes also.
Right. What? Xerxes mentioned in Ezra? I thought
one of my kids. My youngest kid is named Xerxes.
Oh, your youngest kid.
I love the name so much.
Yeah, there's just some names, right? Like Arpash.
Right. I know it's not always 100% clear.
Yeah, and now, so be it as it may, that we definitely see that the Purim story was a prelude to going back to Bayis Sheni, which definitely Nehemiah, maybe Ezra still at that point unclear. Ezra when with Zerubbabel comes back, goes back again, then Nehemiah comes, but it definitely doesn't happen without a Purim story. Now, for sure, like the Shita, that like the position that Darius was the son of Esther and Achashverosh, then for sure. But even I think without that, the salvation. I mean, this is the old Yesod that every time Klal Yisrael tries to lay claim to Eretz Yisrael, Amalek is there to try and lay his claim, and that's why, of course, once you had the beginning of Bayis Sheni, it gets stopped. And then after the Purim, so we're able to go back. But it's not taught to on Purim. Not at all.
I remember you told me last year. I tell you, I disrespectfully disagree. I don't hear the questions I was wrong. I'll tell you why.
Disrespectfully disagree?
No, respect. Okay. Did I say disrespectfully?
I think you said disrespectfully disagree. But okay. It's okay.
I tell you, I'm really not the same since Corona. Seriously, I'm not back to myself yet.
Yeah.
That's like the best excuse. Like I go over to people in the street and I elbow them in the face. And I'm so sorry I had Corona. I berate people. I go to behind it. I start berating a person. You're terrible. And sorry, I'm getting over Corona. That's a great excuse for things.
Yeah, right.
So
you don't like my question? You
don't find an emphasis on going into Eretz Yisrael by Bayis Rishon. I'm sorry, after the Midbar. You don't find an emphasis on the Binyan Bayis Rishon. You don't find an emphasis on the second coming into Eretz Yisrael. In fact, the only thing the Gemara mentions, Kanisa, it really could have been much, much better. It's also Gemara and Brachas. These days aren't significant. The days that you find are significant. We spoke about Megillus Tainus, right? Megillus Tainus is a whole sefer filled with, I don't think we have the whole thing today, but we have definitely major parts of it filled with days that, I have one at home. You can learn it. You never heard of all these days. Because none of these days had significance to the long-term history of the Jewish people. We only chose days that had short-term significance. I'm sorry. I just said it totally wrong. We don't choose the commemorate days that have short-term significance, only long-term. And you even see by Hanukkah, the day on which we regained our independence we don't even know what day it was for sure. The only day we celebrate the Chashmonayim, the day when we had religious autonomy in the Beis Hamikdash. So I think it's the same thing here.
Well, not only that, the day, but by Hanukkah, the day we got autonomy is 25 years later.
Right, but
it is in Megillus Tainus, by the way. It is mentioned.
I know it's in Megillus Tainus, but that's the whole thing.
But you're right. We don't celebrate it.
I said many times. Megillus Tainus is Batel, Chutz Chanukah Purim. That's only 2 days in Megillus Tainus which have not been negated. Everything else is not.
So I agree with your site. I agree with what you're saying. I just don't think it refers to this. Like I have a whole class that I gave. I probably quoted something on the podcast before about how the Seder, the magic number is 5. Did we ever talk about that? Maybe we'll talk about it in the coming days. But the fascinating Taz, I believe, that I quote in that class, where the Taz says the reason that Shabbos HaGadol is on Shabbos and not on Yud Nisan is lest Klal Yisrael think Yud Nisan is Yom Tov. Because what's Yud Nisan? Yud Nisan is the day they cross the Yarden, right? The day they cross the Jordan River to go into Bais Rishon. And the Taz says that's not a Yom Tov because it's not a Yom Tov, right? And
so in general, we don't. I even wonder during Bayis Sheni, did they recognize the day that the second Beis Hamikdash was built? Was that a day on the calendar? I'm not sure.
So that's a good question. It is, I believe, also Megillus Tainus. I think, if I'm correct. But you have other discussions with the Second Temple. It's machlokas if they fast the Dalet Tanesa, if they had the 4 fasts. It's machlokas. It seems, I think Rambam says they did not. Others say they did.
Right.
The
implication of the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah, they did it only when Klal Yisrael was being persecuted. So meaning during the Hanukkah era, that era of the Greeks, they probably did say it. Other times they didn't say it. Yeah, but some should say it means it was like sort of optional. Right? But yeah, I would like to see. I'll have to review Megillus Tainus and see if that.
Yeah,
day
I just got a new edition of it somewhere on my shelf here, but I got a different edition with a commentary that I just got recently. I know always the Hunter put out one.
Right? Yeah, I have that one. It's very good.
Yes, I got that one recently. But again, I don't. Your point's a very valid point in general about the days, about commemorating the days, that the whole the Havesi, Pesach time. That whole, granted, but. That's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that one of the reasons, now I could be wrong on this, but one of the reasons I believe that Purim is timeless is the fact that it paved the way to build the second Beis Hamikdash. That's the reason why Hanukkah is timeless. That the Avodah stopped for the only time ever, right? Ever when Klal Yisrael had the Beis Hamikdash, the service stopped and was restarted. That's what we're celebrating on Hanukkah.
But again, that begs the question. It was only restarted for another 200 years, roughly 180 years.
Right. And again, we've dealt with that. The question of why that's so significant. Again, if we're not, like you said, commemorating when the first Beis Hamikdash was dedicated. I'm sorry. Well, yeah, we don't commemorate when the first Beis Hamikdash was dedicated. We don't commemorate when the second Beis Hamikdash was dedicated, and we don't really commemorate when the Mishkan. But we do a little bit of the Mishkan.
I think the commemoration of Hanukkah and Purim are the ideals. Hanukkah is the ideal of Klal Yisrael fighting for our religious life, and Purim is the idea of what to do at a time of tsar, what to do at a time when we're being oppressed. The idea of davening and banding together, like Lech K'nais Kol HaYehudim, gather the Jews together. I think those are the messages. If I take of the takeaways from Hanukkah and Purim, I don't see them so much relating to the Beis Hamikdash. Not that it didn't have some relation. I don't think the essence of these days relates to the Beis Hamikdash.
Okay. Well, okay. I hear. So therefore, that's why it's not mentioned, because it is not really the essence of the day. And
you really don't see it brought down.
Right. No. And my question is, right, you don't see it. It's not, the connection isn't made. Now, I'm not talking about just the observance of the Yom Tov. I'm talking about
the idea of the remembrance of wiping out Amalek. I mean, some Shitas learn, the Gemara asks a question, why are they're not allowed to make up new mitzvahs? So the Gemara gives an answer that really it's not a new mitzvah, brings us a book about the Bavli and Yerushalmi. Speak about this, and the implication is, one of the Mefarshim Yerushalmi says it right in the Amud, that the purpose is that the Purim is about remembering Amalek. That's what Purim is. It's about remembering and wiping out Amalek. So meaning the goal of Purim is a lot to do with stamping out evil in our midst, stamping out evil inside of ourselves. We know talk about Amalek is whenever Amalek comes. Right? What was the first time Amalek came? The Parashas Peshalach. What happened? Klal Yisrael said, "Ayesh Hashem b'kibenu amayim." Is Hashem amongst us or not? What's the next pasuk? Vayavu Amalek. Amalek comes.
Or Rifia de Torah, right? Wasn't it the?
Right. That's
right.
what the Gemara says.
Yeah.
So in other words, when Klal Yisrael questions Hashem's existence, when we question our own our own essence, are we really here? That's when Amalek comes in. I think those are the lesson. I just don't hear the basic mixtures as being such a part of it. Again, basic mixtures is part of everything. I mean, the Gemara does creates Megillah Daicha Binyan Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara does discuss those things. But I think the essence of Purim is remembering also the idea of Kabbalah Teresh V'Peh.
Right, and you're playing it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah,
I was saying, and you're playing into exactly what the famous Chazal, Halacha Shulchan Aruch, the whole thing about how Purim lo V'Spata, that Purim will exist even when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, right? Because it again, if it was only connected to the Bayis Sheni, it wouldn't. There's not a timeless lesson, but there's
it's interesting. It says it says about Kabbalah Satira. It says in Parashas Devarim, referring to Har Sinai, it says "Kol Gadol V'Lo Yasaf," a great voice that did not cease. And it says in the end of Mikra Megillah, "Lo Yasaf Mizaram," the voice of this miracle will never cease to exist. That's a basis of it never being negated. That's actually the Yerushalmi says that's the basis of the Masechta. Why we have Masechta Megillah is because of that pasuk. Because that's how we ensure it's never forgotten, by having a Masechta of Gemara about it. And you're really teaching the supremacy of Teresh V'Peh, the chashivas of Teresh V'Peh. Right? Bavli is the Yerushalmi is a couple mentions of it. Another mention it has where that the words of Teresh V'Peh are more chaviv to Hashem and the words of Teresh V'Ksav. But a lot of sources that really the essence of Purim relates to the idea of Teresh V'Peh, relates to our acceptance of the oral law.
Right. So it's I'm sure you remember very vividly, as if it was yesterday, that at a young man's bar mitzvah back in 2016 maybe, he actually spoke about this, the whole thing about Purim, lo V'Spato and all that, and I'm sure you remember all the details of that bar mitzvah pshato, because it explained.
Who was that young man? Was that your son?
That was Moshe Abelandis, yes, and he wrote it himself. He researched it himself from beginning to end. Again,
it's like my friend told me about his son's pshatul. He said, in the middle of my son's pshatul, I realized he skipped a page. The scary part was not one person in shul, nor did he himself notice it.
Yeah. So I
was talking about. Yeah, I wish I remembered that. I don't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you the one you said, and then we'll get back to, because there's something interesting in the Yotzros I want to share with you. That's why I'm looking down here, because I'm looking up the Yotzros, because I'm sure in Yeshivas Abbas, you said Yotzros this past Shabbos, right?
What can I say? It's Chatani Masker Ayoim. We don't say Yotzros. Yotzros are beautiful. We should say them. Why don't we say them? Yotzros has become, it's like Bahab, Yotzros, Yom Kippur Katan. They're looked at with such fear today, right? That they're just, it's like, I don't know. Personally, whatever. Yotzros are beautiful. Ashkenazi Jews used to say them. You know that?
Yeah, in Eretz they say them for whenever there's a Musaf one. They don't say the Shachris ones, and in Lakewood they say them. And in Lakewood they say them too. Apparently for the same reason, that it's in both yeshivas, their original hosts when they came. I think Lakewood might have been back in Klutsk or whatever it was in Europe, where Rivaron came from. Not Klutsk. Where did Rivaron come from? Klutsk, right? Klutz, that the shul that housed the yeshiva, and for Ruderman when they came to Baltimore, that the shul said Yotzros, so he felt that they should keep it. So there's something in the Yotzros here where it mentions Oh, so the Purim was batal. So it was a beautiful shot. I think it is either Ritzvah or Rashba who says it. But it's not that we won't have other Yom Tovim, and it's not that we won't have all the other mitzvahs. We will for sure have them, but they'll just be dwarfed
They'll be
by
secondary.
But
Right.
but again, that just shows how amazing the lesson of Purim
Right.
is.
But Purim, right, exactly, right. I think the Rabbit also, I believe, says that.
Because the Rabbin says it, yeah.
The Rabbit says also. I think a lot of Rishonim say it. It will just be dwarfed by it. That's a good word. We need to use the word dwarfed more often. Is that a politically correct word today?
Probably not. But again, it ameliorates Purim.
I don't want to embarrass you on this podcast. You're a dwarf, if I remember correctly, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I am. I walk on stilts all the time to try and correct it. But it's, it shows you the greatness of Purim that even then the lessons are still going to be there. So
I don't even know. Was that question funny? I don't think I'm even funny anymore. I think my sense of humor went away with Corona.
Rabbi Spero, I think you're still funny.
Thank you. You're boosting my ego, but I really don't think I am anymore. What can I do?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not finding the yotzos. I'll have to find it later. But okay, sorry, because I can't find I can't find the exact part of the yotzos, so I can't remember it. So we're just going to move on to the next idea. So. Right. So I want an important yesod, I believe, not so much with Purim, but this is something that I say often. I think it needs to be said here on the podcast, and that is that when we're talking about going back to Beis Hamikdash, both the Mishkan, right? The Beis Hamikdash, we've had 3 incarnations so far. We've had the Mishkan, the Bais Rishon, and the Bais Sheni. By the way, I'm going on a public service campaign against a lot of the picture books. Not the picture books. Picture books are fine, but I guess some of the pictures we give our kids, they draw very misleading pictures of the Mizbeach from the Mishkan. In other words, they draw all the kelim from the Beis Hamikdash, and they'll give you the Mishkan. I'm sorry, the Mizbeach, the Mizbeach and Nechoshes, and you think, I'm sorry, the Mizbeach Hazav, Nechoshes, the inside one, and you think that it's showing you the Mizbeach from the Mishkan, it's really showing you one from the Mishkan. I'm sorry, I can't get my words out straight. Rabbi Spero, your corona is affecting me now. They show you a picture of the Mizbeach from the Mishkan as the one from the Beis Hamikdash. Now, what's the difference? The size, right? The Mizbeach and the Mishkan was not so big, right? And it had the poles on the side they could carry it, and you never see pictures of what the Kevish and the Mishkan looked like. It must have also been small because the Mizbeach wasn't so small, but the Mizbeach and the Beis Hamikdash was huge.
Right, 10 hours tall, also.
Right. So they always show the one from the Beis Hamikdash as the one from the Mishkan, and it's not accurate. I don't know if you have that problem.
A couple suggestions what you could do about to write this wrong. Number one, a letter writing campaign.
Yeah.
To the Feldheim Art Scroll, just get the word out. I think that would be the first thing. Get it on yeshivaworld.com, matzav.com, Vosses Nayas. Don't get it on all the news sources. You want to get the word out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead and write in the bottom, the dwarves of the world unite. Okay? So you shouldn't be alone in this.
Yeah.
What if we have a dwarf listener right now and he's like, these guys are horrible. Everyone should scrub. Can you scrub when you?
Yeah, we'll scrub that before we publish it. But
all the dwarf references.
If there's a drive-by fruiting on your house, run-by fruiting on your house tonight, you know where it's from.
100%. I deserve it. Trust me.
You do. So, anyways, so as we talk about the Mishkan, both the Mishkan, the Bais Rishon, Bais Sheni, Abraham help from the Bais Shlishi. There's a very important yesod, and I don't know how you teach it to the Bachrim when you have your weekly parsha shir, but there's 2 approaches during these parshios. That these parshas, I mean the last 5 of Shemos and goes to Vayikra, and so there's an approach of that they come at a very auspicious time because they come during Purim and Pesach and Sfira and Shavuos, so you can go like 3 months without ever talking about the parsha, and some people do that. And I think that's an avla gedola. It is a tremendous missed opportunity. At the very now I agree. Baruch Hashem, I've learned kachim before. I find, and I'm going to say here, I might sound like an apikoros, but I find a lot of kachim very dry. It's just there's not a lot of lumdus, it's a lot of details, and I get that it's hard to really get a good schmack out of. I at least in my humble opinion. I don't know if you feel that way, Rabbi Spero, but there's one thing that we have to know as just a aside, and that is that if I don't know, if quarter of the Torah is dedicated to the Mishkan, which it is between Sefer Vayikra and End of Shmos, and a third of Shas is dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash and Klal Yisrael B'Tahara, then you know that this is a very important part of who we are. So therefore, the problem is not on Kudshim that I have a problem relating to. The problem is on Pinchas Landis that I have a problem relating to Kudshim. And obviously, it doesn't mean that I should just skirt around it by only talking about Purim and Pesach and Svira and all these things. No, I need to work harder, that means, to get the geschmack out of it.
But first of all, I think if a person looks at it, to me, a very, very important sefer is a Shamshin Fall Hirsch, both on Chumash and he has on the based from his monthly things. There's article from his monthly. I forgot what he used to have a monthly. I forgot what it's called. He wrote it in Germany. There's a lot of pieces about the Kalim and the Mishkan. It's very kedai to read them. It gives a lot of good insights. Second of all, yeah, I think also, first of all, I think if you learn Kachim the right way, certainly, for example, you learn Me'ilah. Me'ilah is actually super geschmack. Parts of Zeracha and parts of Menachos. You learn the lumdus behind it. It really is not so dry, but I understand why it definitely does appear dry. But yeah, obviously the fact that the Torah spends 5 parshias basically on the Mishkan, it obviously means, and it's never going to be built again. There's never going to be a Mishkan again. We are never going to have a Mishkan again. We have a Beis Hamikdash, Mitzvah should come soon, but we're never going to have a Mishkan again. Obviously means the lessons of the Beis Hamikdash are still relevant. They're still timely as they were 3,400 years ago when the Torah was given. And when the Mishkan stood for the combined years of the Mishkan, I think in the Midbar was well over 400, even close to 500 years the Mishkan stood for. But it's as relevant then as it was today. So yeah, it's our job is to learn these parshas as to make it relevant. I agree with that. It is hard though. Like last week. So last week was Parshas Truma. Parshas Truma is a great parsha. On the other hand, it's the last year before Purim. This Thursday night is obviously Purim. So, yeah, and then then we have Kisisa, Vayakov, put 2 weeks of nothing else. Yeah, but it should be emphasized. A person has to live. One of the goals of the Torah is that a person is living within the parsha. His life is within the parsha, and that's how he relates to things. And that's the halacha at the beginning of Parshas Kisisa. Parshas Kisisa is the first 2 aliyahs are over 90 psukim. Right? The famous question is why. So the answer is because we want to give those 2 aliyahs to someone who's a Levi. Kain gets the first aliyah, Levi gets the second aliyah. Why? Because it's talking about the Chet Egel, and we don't want the people in the shul to be standing up by the aliyah and being embarrassed if that what your ancestors did. Whenever I learn that halacha, I always think, do any people really feel embarrassed? Would people feel embarrassed if a guy got, if the Balkari made a mistake, if the reader made a mistake, and they called up Shlishi too early, and he was up there for the Egel Azav? Would that guy really be like, I am so embarrassed? So, but that, I think just the lesson itself is, yeah, probably we're not so embarrassed, but at least to think about being embarrassed, to think about living through the parshas if it's happening right now. That's the goal of Torah. Every year to live through Mechiras Yosef. Every year we should live through the Mechira. Every year to live through Yetzias Mitzrayim. I always hold that and I was a kid, I always used to ask my father this. I said, why don't we make it more that we read the parshas of Shmais, Va'era, Bai, B'Shalach in Adar? Right? It seems it would make more sense. I think it's to give it's a preparation, not only just for the Seder, preparation for what it means to be a Jew. Right? The preparation of knowing what it means, living these parshas, feeling like we left time. And the only way you can do these things is by learning. Rav Tzadok says that the only way a person can really enjoy Torah, love Torah, is like to live Torah is to learn Torah, and that's our goal.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, you're right. There's two topics that you sparked in my, a little bit offshoots from what you were saying. But number one is always a fascinating topic to me, is the whole evolution of Kriyas Torah as we know it. because how we have it today, it's roughly, it's probably Rav, who established it like we have it.
You wrote a great article about that.
Yeah, I have an article about it in Kan magazine, right? So it was some of those Rav who established it as we have it, and therefore it's circa less than 2,000 years old, 1,700 years, 1,800 years old, and one thing is clear is that before that there was definitely more of a dagesh on the Inyana Diyoma.
Right. True.
Because they were reading the Parsha Shavuot was a lot shorter. There wasn't that, it was a much shorter process, a much shorter cycle.
By the way, is in Yana Diyama right now, because the Gemaras that discusses are Masechus Megillah, very interestingly. Right, the Gemaras that discuss the daily, the man, all these things, these are all in the fourth parak of Masechus Megillah. Both Bavli tell me. So
right, exactly.
Lance, could you please post your Kan article?
Yes, we will post it together. We will post it on with this episode. So one other thing, there's a question that I asked you. I don't know, maybe over the summer it was bothering me, and it was on the Navi podcast, and as I was chazering through the Navi podcast, which is wonderful. If you're not subscribed to the Navi podcast, you guys subscribe to the Navi podcast.
If you're not subscribed to the Navi podcast, I will come out there and I will personally find you, and I'm not even going to say what I'm going to do to you.
And watch out, because he had corona, so he can get away with it. So, I have to, my daily chazara of Nach has taken a different trajectory. So because I was doing when I got up to Shlomo Amalek, I'm doing this from Shlomo Amalek, and Mishle has taken a long time to get through. Even though I learned most of it, but it's just taking time. It takes time to do Mishle at any level. Anyhow, so a question I asked you on the Navi podcast that relates to this week's parsha and to Korbanos in general is that we see that Shaul lost his malchus for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is he didn't wipe out Amalek. He let Agag live, and he let the choicest of the animals live. He let the ameliorated animals live, right? I don't know if that fit. He let the best of the animals live. And you see that Shmuel Navi chastises him for him and takes matters into his own hand and kills Agag himself, but not after he was able to procreate and sow his seed so that he would continue to exist. We see that less than 2 years later, David and Melech has a whole skirmish with Amalek, and they seem to, as described by the Navi at that point, they already seem to be a force to be reckoned with. Again, that somehow they went from being whoever the descendant of Agag was at that point to be a whole nation, enough to start off with King David while he's running from Shaul. It seemed to be a force to be reckoned with. So I asked this Rabbi Spero, and the answer he gave me is there's the Medrash that says that the Amalekim are skilled in dark arts, and therefore many of them, to avoid being put to death by Shaul's army, turned into animals, and that's they avoided being put to death. That when Shaul saved the animals, those were the Amalekim, and they later turned back into humans, and so it wasn't just Agag's child, but it was
those other ones.
Animals. So the question I had on that, Rabbi Spero, is that why did Shaul save the animals? What was his cheshbon? It was to bring korbanos for them. No,
right. I've slipped my mind for a second.
Right. I think it was. I don't know if the Psukim said it beferish, but definitely
right. That was the reason.
Right. So number one, did he not bring korbanos with them? Right. In other words, did he not do with them what he planned to do with them? Number two is that if Shmuel Navi was trying to rectify the wrong, why didn't he kill the animals too?
I'll give you an even better question.
Yeah.
Which I've recently, I saw Rav Tzaddik discuss this question. Why is David HaMelech never commanded to fight Amalek specifically and wipe them all out? Why is Shlomo HaMelech never commanded to fight Amalek and wipe them all out? Why do they seem to disappear from the stage of Jewish history after the story in Shmuel Beis? I mean, they're mentioned again, but they seem to disappear as far as war with them.
And not only that, and I'll add to, not that Tzadok needs my help, but once Haman comes onto the scene, it doesn't seem he's backed by a whole nation, right? The nation is Parus Amadai at that point. It's the Persian Medes nation.
He's an individual. He's an individual Amalek.
Yeah.
I would imagine, I think I once told you that I once gave a shir to a very liberal crowd, and they said to me, one of the people there said, I don't believe in Purim. I said, why not? Because the Jews do genocide on Purim. I said, where do you see the Jews do genocide on Purim? They killed 75,000 people. I said they weren't like running around the streets murdering people. Chas v'shalom, such a thing never happened. They were killing the people who were the not what we would call the Nazis, right? I always imagine. I wonder if those were the Amalekim who came after them. But it's a very interesting sugya. The Agais Maimonides writes on the Rambam that there was, except for the story of Shmuel and Shaul, there was never a mitzvah to wipe out Amalek. Only in the days when Mashiach is coming, the wars, the pre-Mashiach wars. It's a very complicated sugya. I mean, I just want to throw one more thing in there to make it even more, a little more, not confusing, but maybe a little more clarity. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik held, and he takes this from his grandson, from Rabbi Spero Soloveitchik, that Amalek is not only a nation, it's a conceptual idea, people who want to kill Jews. So, I know we said before that Amalek was slave traders. I think they obviously were a nation at one point, but then they kind of switched. But I don't know. These are a lot of good questions.
Well, again, along those lines, I heard a great Yesod once from Mordechai Nugenshul that he said that there's a famous there's a Pirkei Rebbe Elazar and there's a Chaim Vital a lot later, obviously, and probably a few more in between that talk about how La'asid Lavo that Yishmael and Amalek are going to be mu'urav with one another, going to be mixed up with one another. Right, so I think the Pirkei Rebbe Elazar was the first one to say it. Elazar ben Horkanus, and then Reb Chaim Vital gives like a whole sphere on what that means and what it's going to look like, and it's a scary description of pretty much what we have going on today. So I once heard from Mordechai Nugenshul that the one Nugenshul,
whatever, yeah.
Nugenshul, got it.
We say Nugenshul.
I said Nugenshul, but whatever, Nugenshul is fine. Whatever it is.
Good name. I'm gonna start calling you that.
Okay. Along with calling me Zertskis or anti-Zertskis. You're going to call me anti-Zertskis. I want to be the anti, not the anti-Zertskis. So he said a beautiful Yesod that when, in Yishmael's Midah is not murder. It's not Ritzicha. That's Esav, right? When the Rebbeinu Shalom came to Yishmael asked me one of the Torah, the issue was not lo tirsach, it was lo signov, which it probably wasn't even lo signov because I was talking about kidnapping, but it was not stealing, right? That's what their national, nisayon is, if you will. But now, and not that, but for the most part, in the history of Yishmael, for sure before the rise of Islam, and even from the rise of Islam, you saw in their conquest one thing, but never so much with Jews, at least on a mass scale. There's never this attempt to wipe out the Jews at the hands, by the hands of the Muslims. That wasn't until later times when you see this coming out, this idea of Esav and Yishmael being mixed together. So he said a cute thing. He said, so what's the midah of Amalek? The midah of Amalek is the whole thing that we saw in the Midbar, that they asher karcha b'derech, how they wanted to cool us down because we were too hot. And Rashi gives the example of a burning cauldron, and they knew they were going to die. But if you jump into a burning cauldron, you can cool it off. So he said, in his beautiful Israeli English, he said they were the original suicide bombers. Right? that basically Amalek was the original kamikaze pilot, the suicide bombers. And he said, when you see that midah in Yishmael today, which unfortunately we see very often, he said, that's not Yishmael, that's Esav, that's Amalek within Yishmael. Right? That's Amalek within Yishmael. He said the only problem is they killed themselves, so you can't carry out Mechias Amalek at that point. But he said that midah, that the suicide, but the terrorism, he said that's not Yishmael. That's not Ishmael's trade. That's Amalek, and that's what we see Amalek playing out in Yishmael. So,
Berlandis, I feel you.
You feel me? Good. I feel you too. Okay, so I know Rabbi Spero has some very important engagements that he's got to get to. So we're gonna end our comeback episode here, but don't worry, bli neder, bli shavua, Helfen. We will be back again next week to bring you another great episode. And just be sure to do us a favor. Be sure to like this wherever you're listening to it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies. Send it out to everyone you know. And if they get annoyed, just say that your phone was hacked and just start sending it out on its own. But we need to get the Rabbis podcast out to anyone and everyone out there so they can listen to it and hear these wonderful thoughts. And in the meantime, we'd like to just wish you a very freilich Purim, and we look forward to talking to you more next week.
Welcome to the guest.